And I think she proved that this year by climbing 2 of the world's hardest climbs, and in doing so became the first woman to climb 515 twice in 6 months. She's also here this weekend to accept AAC's Bates Award. This is given out annually to a young climber who we recognize that has demonstrated exceptional skill and character in the climbing arts and has outstanding promise for future accomplishments. We couldn't think of anybody who fits that bill better this year. She'll be accepting her award tonight, and I'm so pleased that we get to hear from her this morning. So please welcome Margo Hayes.
I was controlling it for a second, and I was like, oh, wait. Well, first of all, I want to thank the American Alpine Club for having me here today, and for all of you guys being here. I'm honored to be able to stand here and share a little bit of my story. So I'm just going to start out with, my parents weren't very subtle when they expressed who they wanted my sister and I to become when we grew up. They wanted us to be, as my mom would say, citizens of the world. So people who traveled, people who learned about different cultures, tried different food, and most of all, people that really respected our planet. So I was outside from the point I can remember. I was growing up in the garden, eating food from the garden, and running around in the dirt. We were up in the mountains. Growing up in Colorado, I really had the opportunity to be outdoors for most of my childhood. So I wouldn't be climbing now if it weren't for gymnastics. Gymnastics was my original passion. That's where a lot of my dreams were born. My dream of going to the Olympics, my dream of reaching my potential in a sport. I was always inspired by the challenge and the beauty of kind of the mind and body connection. And so I actually began at Cats Gymnastics in Boulder, Colorado with Rob Candelaria. Rob Candelaria was my head coach. Here I am with me and my friend Mia. We did a national selection program called TOPS. So we used to leave school early and go to the gym before practice and do strength and conditioning. I'm so weak now compared to when I was 6 years old. It's crazy. So as a gymnast, the gym actually doubled as a climbing wall with an old wooden wall in it that Rob had built. And there were always climbers on the wall, and between my routines at the gym, I would remember watching them, and I was always really curious about their sport. And little did I know, I was witnessing some of the training sessions of some of the best climbers in the world. For instance, Lynn Hill would be there climbing, and I'd just be like staring there between my routines. And, I didn't know who was who, but I just admired the motion and the beauty of the sport and of what they were doing. So that is not my taped ankle, but that would be me most of the time. A combination of being a lanky little thing and also being fearless was resulted in many, many broken bones. Luckily, no tendon stuff, so everything healed pretty fast. But although I wasn't a climber, mountaineering and climbing wasn't foreign to me. My grandfather, Dr. James Morrissey, who's actually here today, he's been a member of the American Alpine Club for nearly 50 years now. And he spent a lot of time in the Himalayas, and for instance, in 1983, he led the first ascent up the east face of Everest, which was just 2 years after he joined the expedition with Dick Blum in 1981. Here he is on that expedition. My dad was also a climber. He grew up in California, and when he was in college, he discovered Yosemite, like many others, fell in love right away. So he used to take the trip from Stockton down to Yosemite and spend the weekends there. My dad actually never climbed on plastic until I started climbing, so we learned from each other. This was my first time ever climbing Yosemite about 4 or 5 years ago. My dad took me up the classic Nutcracker, and I remember I was so sore the next day because it was this type of climbing that I was just not used to at all. But my dad is definitely my favorite climbing partner. I guess the level of trust between us is just unbeatable. So, all right, so after many injuries, like I said, I started climbing, and I started on Robin Ebersfield's Team ABC in Boulder, Colorado. Climbing was an activity that I could do, well, top roping, without impact on my broken ankle, and I could go one-footed, and it was some way that I could move my body. I never wanted to stay still when I was young. I'm still that way, although I can relax sometimes, but not often. But I learned a lot of my early outdoor climbing from my dad as well as Robin, and Craig Lubin, another climber from Colorado. He actually took Team ABC out for one summer on some top roping excursions, and I remember he taught us about like happy and sad turtles, and how with our helmets, whenever we took our helmet off, we had to have it with the shell up, otherwise the turtle would roll away. Unfortunately, about a year after we spent the summer with him, he passed away in an ice climbing accident. But now I always think of him every time I put my helmet on or set it down. So when I see this picture, I see family. This was Team ABC growing up. We used to take many trips to Waco and Red Rocks, and Robin, here who I'm spotting, my coach, she welcomed me in as one of her kids, one of the family, and she didn't only allow me to come on team trips, but she brought me on her family vacations. I was introduced to so many amazing spots, like within the U.S., first of all, Red River Gorge, Waco, Red Rocks, etc., Joe's Valley, and some climbing in Colorado as well as internationally. She used to take me to Rodear with her kids, so we'd climb in Spain. It was always so free. The day was so simple. Wake up, go climbing, explore, go swim, eat good Spanish food, and it was simple, but we were really allowed to explore, and that's something that I'm really grateful for. So here I am on climbing in Waco, probably maybe my 4th year there. We always had goals and challenges, and it was always, everybody would set up, where they wanted to go, and then we'd kind of divvy it up, and we'd go support each other on our projects. So I really learned a lot from that team, a lot about teamwork and support. So I don't do a ton of bouldering outside. I'd like to do some more of it. I haven't done much since I broke my back about 4 years ago in a competition. I got compression fractures, but now I'd like to get back into bouldering outside. Here I am in Rocky Mountain National Park, though, which is one of the amazing places that we have just near Estes Park. It's really accessible, long hike, but super fun. But what I wanted to say is that I've always set goals. For instance, my parents find these sheets of paper with my goals when I was 7 years old, 6 years old, and these would be short-term goals all the way up to goals that were maybe 10 years in the future. So I've always been very determined, and I like writing things down, keeping myself accountable for them, and it's really exciting. I think that I've learned from my family, from my grandfather, from my mother, from my father, that it's okay to dream big, and my parents have always said that the sky's the limit. So anything you can imagine, you can achieve. So going off of making goals, when I turned 18, one of my goals was to climb 14 514s in a year. I chose 14 514s because I like numbers and math, and I'm a little bit quirky that way. I like how it sounds. It has a ring to it. And I knew that it would be a good challenge. So as my first 514, I decided that I would climb the classic Scarface in Smith Rock, Oregon, which is the first ever climb climbed and equipped by an American, Scott Franklin. This climb really drew me in because of its history and also because of my history with the Franklin family. Scott Franklin's son, Jesse, and I were gymnasts together, and we also went to high school together. Really, really nice kid, graduated valedictorian, a really great family. So I had to push through a couple fears in order to complete this climb. I had previously had a finger thing, and I was worried I was going to injure myself, and I felt like I was holding myself back because of that fear. And once I let go, that's when I was really able to complete the climb and take the risk. It's such a beautiful route, and I almost wish that I hadn't done it because I kind of want to go back and do it again. So, because it's just, you feel like you're experiencing a part of history. So I completed my 14.514s in December in Colorado when I was visiting home for the holidays. And I completed them with my dad. My dad has sacrificed so much in order for me to be able to climb and to do what I love. And I'm really grateful for that. I remember it was so freezing that day. So we had a little heater and put little hot rocks on it, and I put them in my chalk bag, and I'd give it another burn and give it another burn. And it's fun. Good memories. Here I am doing what I do 99% of the time, falling. And I think that really, it's always a good reminder for myself to separate falling from failing, because in order to get where you want to go, you need to fall. And that's not failing, that's just learning. So I've done a lot of this all around the world, but mostly in Rifle, Colorado, one of my favorite spots to climb. In Rifle, before I moved to France, about 1.5 years ago, I was climbing quite a bit in Rifle, Colorado. I really wanted to test myself and try some of the more difficult climbs that the canyon has to offer. So just before leaving for France, I was very close on sending Bad Girls Club, a beautiful 9A in the Wicked Cave, really powerful, lots of knee bars. I'm partial towards knee bars. I like them. I say I climb in Rifle, and people are like, oh, knee bars. I'm like, yes, knee bars. But it was probably the quickest trip to Rifle right before I left for France, because I'd been trying this route, and I'd gotten really close, but I hadn't done it, and I knew that I was leaving soon, and if I didn't do it, then it would mean waiting a whole year until the next season. So again, I convinced my dad to go up there for a day, to take a day off of work. And we drove up there the 4 hours. I did 2 warm-ups. I hopped on, I sent, and we drove home 4 hours. So it was the quickest Rifle trip ever, but it was definitely worth it. All right, so I moved to France in September of 2016. Wow, that seems like a while ago already. And what prompted my move to France was when I graduated from high school early in December 2016, or 2015, sorry, moving the wrong direction. 2015, my mom and I spent a little bit of time in France because I wanted to learn more about the country and I wanted to start learning the language. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I ended up spending 3 days in Céüse with 3 friends from Colorado. And while I was there, this boy named Romeric, there he is with 2 of his brothers, and in the back is Jan Novak, a good friend of mine. He was kind enough to catch me on a beautiful line called Deux Limites in Céüse, and we got along really well. I liked how he corrected my French, and I said, if I come back, let's go climbing. And so then several months later, I came back and we went climbing. He showed me around some of his favorite places in the south of France, Saint-Léger, Moulins, Céüse. And so I really made connections with people in France very quickly. They were very welcoming, and it's amazing to see the climbing community internationally, because in the US, it feels very tight, but then you go abroad and it's still that same community, just really kind humans. Going off of that, I got to spend a lot of time with Arnaud Petit, who is a very well-known European climber. He lives in Ségoyer at the foot of Céüse. He's known for his competition climbing in France as well as his outdoor climbing. Arnaud really taught me the importance of having a partner that you trust and having a mentor. I spent quite a bit of time with him. He took me on a couple multi-pitch climbs in Les Calanques, which is in the south of France near Marseille. This was my first ever multi-pitch sport climb, and I was breathtaking. I couldn't believe it. Climbing over the ocean, the sun setting, it was beautiful. Arnaud taught me a lot about the cliff and about how the cliff is, I guess, is not a place for competition. The cliff is the place for, just enjoying the climb. And that's definitely something that I feel as well, so I think that we really related on that point. So we went on our first climb when, not too long after I'd moved to France. I'd been there for a couple months. Maybe a couple months. And my French still wasn't very good, and so I was nervous. This was the first time. Before we go up, he explains everything to me in French, and I'm like, okay, I'm listening, and I think I'm getting maybe 60% of what he's saying. I'm like, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? So I was a little nervous going up, but he trusted me, and that meant a lot. He knew my French wasn't great, but he trusted me to make the right decisions. So he taught me how to, coil a rope and manage the rope after I'd lead the pitch. And I remember I got up there, and I took forever. He was probably like, oh my goodness. But I took forever, but when he got up, he was very impressed by the organization, and I was very proud here. You can see that in that photo. Also, in that same area of Marseille, in Les Calanques, this was just after he'd explained a clove hitch to me, and we actually forgot to pass the grigri. And so I led up, and I got up there and anchored in, and then he said, oh, I forgot to pass you the grigri. Do you remember the knot that I taught you 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago? And I was like, oh, uh-oh. He's like, okay, so you can belay with half of that. I was like, oh my gosh, I was so scared. I was like, he's gonna die, oh gosh. But I had to focus, and luckily when he got to the top, it was correct, but that was really nerve-wracking. But I think after that experience, it definitely built some trust between us. So I got to experience some of the most famous crags in the south of France. Here's Arnaud in Buix, which was the climbing hotspot in the 80s. I've only spent one day there, but I really want to go back. So later on, sorry, I have a little note on the side that didn't get pushed far enough. I apologize. So when I was climbing with Romaric a lot in the south, in Saint-Léger, I ended up meeting a photographer named Jan Novak. Jan and I are now great friends. We actually met at a Greenspitz event in Moulins, and he just turned around and snapped a photo. He sent it to me on Facebook, and he asked if we could climb together more, and I said sure, because I was meeting all sorts of new people in France. And then from that point on, he came outside climbing with me quite a few times and took some photos, and we got to know each other better. And he actually supported me a lot on my journey on biography later on. It was amazing to experience the diversity of climbing that the south of France actually has to offer, because I think often we think of just limestone tufas and stuff, or we think of Céüse, but there are some really different types of rock there. All right, so let's see, in February last year, almost exactly a year ago, I joined John Cardwell and Maddie Hong in Spain. La Rambla 515A was a route that I'd been thinking about for a long time. 515 had been a dream of mine. I remember writing it down years ago, but when I got the opportunity to go and join them, I don't think they expected me to hop on La Rambla with them, but that's what I had in mind. And so I got there, and they'd been there for a week, so they were ahead of the game, and I was kind of behind, falling all over the place, first few tries. And at the beginning, there's actually a crack, which was one of the hardest parts, I think, because I am not experienced in that. So I'd like to learn, I'd like to get better at that for sure in the future. But started making progress, and we started all working together, and it was the first time that I had projected a route with these men that I've looked up to for so long, since I was young. I've known Maddie Hong since I was 10 years old, 11 years old, and now I'm 20, so I've known him for about half my life. And he used to climb at the BRC when I was on ABC. BRC was another team. And I would look up to him, and he was such an inspiration. So to be able to climb beside him and learn beta from him, help him, help each other both ways, it was really amazing. So after I sent La Rambla, I knew what my next goal was. And my next goal was biography in Céüse. Biography was the first ever 515A in the world, climbed by Sharma. Biography realization is what we call it, because the extension, Sharma named it realization, but the original is biography. And I spent a lot of time up at Céüse, so a lot of hours hiking up, and a lot of time warming up on blocage violent, my favorite warm-up there. And then a lot of time hanging on the rope, and a lot of time falling in the air. And through my experience, I got to meet different people through the summer in Céüse. For instance, there's Arnaud on the left, and then on the right is Kelly Cords, a mountaineer from Estes Park, Colorado, who I got to know in Céüse as well. And it's amazing to be at these crags and be inspired by these people that have added so much to the sport in the past and continue to do so. Really, climbing would not be where it is right now if it weren't for the Arnauds and the Kellys in our sport. All right, so I spent quite a bit of time on biography with Maddie Hong and Daniel Woods. We were all three trying it at the same time. And once again, I was projecting with these men, and we were learning from each other, encouraging each other. We had that kind of little bit of like friendly competition going on where we'd motivate each other. And I guess this picture kind of encompasses what I love about this sport, is that it doesn't matter, your build or your size. There's always a way. There's always a solution. So I feel like it's a good metaphor for life. Maddie's hand is underneath, and that's mine on top. So we definitely grabbed some holds differently. And I had some advantages. He had some advantages. And, you just use what you have and work on your weaknesses. And Maddie and Daniel spent about a month in Céüse, and then they headed home after their visas expired. Luckily, they weren't kicked out. Good thing. But sometimes I guess you do anything for trying to get the send. So I went through ups and downs with biography. It was an emotional process for me. I had an injury in my lumbrical muscle. I had kind of a mental block on the route. And then when I was about to leave France, Hello? Okay, we're good. I had one more opportunity to go up to Céüse, and it was when my mom was visiting me. I don't think my mom was expecting a brutal hike to be the majority of her visit in France. I think she probably expected more croissants and, beach time and seeing museums. But I was like, okay, Mama, can we go up to Céüse? And she's like, oh gosh, well, you have to move out of your apartment. So my reward for moving out of my apartment, packing everything up, was that we could head back up to Céüse. So we went back up to Céüse, and on the hike, I'm a pretty fast hiker, at least after doing the hike so many times. And my mom likes to go more slowly. And she encouraged me to go ahead so I could warm up, so she could just take her time. And so I would go ahead of her, and I would leave little markers on the trail, because she didn't know the turns at the beginning. And my mom is amazingly artistic, and so we always create things. And so I'd take little breaks on the trail, and I'd make little markers, and this was one of her favorites that I'd put at the turns, and she'd follow me up. I ended up sending biography on a day that my mom was there, which was really special, because that route meant so much for me. Biography as a whole is just a metaphor for life, and I feel like a metaphor for the way I want to live. I want to take risks, and I don't want to play it safe. I want to, even if I'm uncomfortable, I want to push myself outside of my box. And so when I sent that route, it was a really freeing moment for me and a true realization. No pun intended. Maybe a little bit. To conclude my trip to Europe, my year, I got to spend time with some women who really inspire me and are some of the kindest women out there. Emily Harrington, who you may know, Paige Clausen, Tara, Colette. We went on a trip to Majorca, and we did some deep water soloing as well as sport climbing. I hadn't ever been on a trip with just women like that, and it was a really unique experience because it definitely made a difference. Just the things we'd talk about at the crag, the way that we could all relate to each other. I mean, we spent a lot of time, our rest at the crag, I was braiding everybody's hair, and it was just it was a really fun experience. We were all so supportive of each other, and it was motivating to be with so many other women that were so determined. There we are at the end of the trip. So, as a whole, I just want to express how grateful I am to be part of this community, and that I feel so lucky to have had the inspiration and the role models that I have. I feel like, I'm just at the beginning of my journey, and I definitely feel like such a young pup. I've, accomplished such little things in comparison to so many of you in this room and what you've contributed to the community. So if I can just add a little bit to that at some point, I would be truly honored. So thank you all for listening. I really want to expand on what I've learned in climbing, so I want to do more multi-pitch. I want to learn some trad. I also want to continue in competitions. I love that side of things, and more sport climbs, and see, what's possible, what I'm capable of. Explore more of the world, and I always have specific goals that I'm kind of brewing up in my brain, but I always kind of keep them close to my heart. I think that more women should become involved with kids. So for instance, that's one of my goals this year, is to give back more to the community. I like to work with girls and boys as well, and really get them interested in the sport, because it has so much to offer, and it's changed my life, and I know it can change so many others. For warm-up, I definitely have a routine. I start out with 10 minutes and I have this little like therapy ball. I don't know if it does much. It might be more of a mental thing than a than a real warm-up thing, but I do that for about 10 minutes, and then after that, I definitely take my time warming up on easy climbs, because I think that the number one reason people get injured is because they don't warm up properly. And although it can be tempting to hop on something that's going to challenge you right off the bat, it's definitely worth taking the time. And on warm-ups, that's a lot where I kind of remind myself and I just feel my body and feel the movement on the wall. And that's really what I love about climbing. It's not the grade or the difficulty or anything like that. It's really just I love the dance on the wall. I think that it's wonderful climbing's entering the Olympics because I think it's a step in the direction of being on the biggest world stage. I've always loved the Olympics since I was young. I haven't watched as much of this Winter Olympics as I'd like to, but it's always been something that's really inspired me as a gymnast and now, as a climber. And I like watching sports that I know nothing about as well. Climbing is now in the Olympics as a multidiscipline sport, so there will be one medal for a combined score of speed climbing, sport climbing, and bouldering. And I think that ideally there would be a combined event as well as individual disciplines, like in gymnastics, for instance. But you can't jump from 0 to 100, and the fact that it's in the Olympics and it's moving in that direction, I think is really, really wonderful. Yes. Okay, yes, I do eat ice cream. I prefer gelato, actually, and chocolate, everything chocolate. I don't do ice climbing, no. Rock and indoor climbing. Yeah. I haven't done a lot of outdoor bouldering. I used to when I was younger, but now I've gotten more into outdoor sport climbing. I like the feeling of being so high up, and I like the journey of it all. Bouldering, I like bouldering as well, but it's much quicker. And with climbing on a rope, it's such a journey, and it's about pacing yourself, and it's a type of meditation, I feel like. But I do bouldering in competitions. Yes. Yeah. I did, yeah. I went to the university there for a semester, and then the second semester I just climbed. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Maybe I think it would be great to have maybe multi-generational workshops, for instance, and people in different types of climbing and kind of working on those different types of climbing with each other. For instance, having a mountaineer and having a competition climber and then having a trad climber and then kind of sharing those experiences with each other, because I think that we can all branch out. There are so many different genres of the sport. Yeah.
How do you think competition climbing helps or translates to projecting hard routes or
I think that training indoors definitely helps for climbing hard routes outside. I also think it's a very different mental state, but I think that they can complement each other, because I think when you change it up and when you don't just stick to one avenue, it challenges you, and by challenging you, it helps you grow as a climber as a whole. Yeah. Yeah, Yeah, in climbing, I haven't had any bad injuries. I did get compression fractures in T11 and T12 at a competition, but I had a back brace for a couple months, and I didn't do much, and I healed up, and I'm totally fine now. But in climbing, I have dealt with some tendon stuff in my hands, and I think that's just if you're going to put your body through something like that, if you're going to be an elite athlete in any sport, then some of that just comes along with it, and it's something that you have to deal with, and you try and prevent with good warm-up, for instance. But I definitely had many more issues with my injuries as a gymnast than as a climber. I think listening to your body, and when something hurts, being able to step back and know it's time to mellow out a little bit is important. It's something that I'm still learning.
Do you tape your fingers?
Do I tape them? Well, if I have an injury, then sometimes. For instance, I learned an interesting taping technique from a German doctor when I had a strain in my lumbrical muscle from climbing so much on biography, dropping my pinky, that there was a stretch between these two muscles. And so I learned a new taping technique. It wasn't very comfortable to climb with, but if I could climb, then I was going to do it. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we give her a round of applause?